we ready?
Sure.
Yeah. All right.
Let's roll.
Welcome to the Kaysville City Planning Commission meeting for Thursday, April 13th. We'll start with our opening approval of minutes for the March 23rd meeting.
I move that we approve the minutes from March 23rd.
I'll second.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye. I have a question already about, so out of curiosity,
Question.
minutes,
Josh.
when we approve the minutes and they say one thing, and then in theory, like last meeting that was videoed or audioed or both, the audio is different than the minutes, and somehow down the road somebody wants to look at one or the other. Maybe this isn't your prerogative to answer, but which one is is the approved minutes gonna, I don't imagine that it would override the audio, what was actually said, but, and if that's the case, then why do we care about the minutes if we have the audio version?
Well, firstly, because it's state law.
Well, I guess that's a good reason.
The minutes are only required to be summary minutes.
Okay.
It's only been the last 3 or 4 years that audio was required. So it's an evolving thing.
Sure. Okay. That's all I had.
Do you have a sense of how much traffic there is as far as people checking the clicks on the minutes versus clicks on the audio/video?
I don't track that.
That would be a good, curious thing.
Yeah. I think Emery does a great job, by the way. I mean,
I second that.
Unanimous approval all the time. Yeah.
We approve.
Mark Josh is a nay for that.
That is not what I was saying.
Can you make sure that was in the minutes?
Verbatim. Okay. All right, we'll move on to item number 2, conditional use permit for a major home occupation B, electrical contractor at 5 South Wilden Court for Michael Bowers.
And just as a brief introduction to the item, the property at 5 South Wilden Court is a new home, part of the Homestead at Hills Farm subdivision. Mr. Bowers is an electrical contractor, so has applied to have a home occupation at the location you can see here on the map on the screen and in your packet. He does have some tool and equipment, but it's ultimately, per my discussions with him and from his past experience, able to store everything essentially within a truck or the garage, so it's not stuff that's going to kind of spew out and be noticeable all over the neighborhood. So based on that and having gone through the regulations with them, staff's recommended approval of the conditional use without additional conditions. And he is here this evening if there are questions or anything that the Planning Commission would need from him.
Thank you. I just have a quick question. So when you say kept it within his truck or trailer or in the garage, what's the regulations on like the trailer? Can the trailer be on the side of the house, or what's the?
So I don't believe the home occupation ordinance specifically states where a trailer could or couldn't be if it's in relation to the business. So if there's need to regulate that, I suppose that could be a consideration. But it does get into the size consideration. So I think it's a 24-foot or smaller vehicle, which would include a truck or trailer, should fit within that scope. Essentially keeping it out of some of the really big, heavy commercial type apparatus that you might see.
That's a good question.
I know of a place where there's a trailer out on the street all the time, and it's a big trailer, and it kind of blocks traffic a little bit, so I was just curious, not this one in case, but. All right, any questions? So is there a representative here?
Yes, he is here this evening.
Okay. Any
I
questions?
don't have any questions. No, this is pretty straightforward stuff.
Yeah, I'm
So
good with it.
I can make a motion.
Okay, if we're ready.
I'll make a motion that we approve conditional use permit for a major home occupation B electrical contractor for Mr. Michael Bowers at 5 South Wilden Court.
I'll second that.
Aye.
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 Great. Thank you. Next is a conditional use permit for farm animals at 1130 East Sherwood Drive for Heidi Greenway Thompson.
Okay, so the proposal, you can see at the property is the northeast side of town, just off of Sherwood on the corner lot, shown on the map there and in your packet. The request is specifically to keep chickens or hens on site. They currently don't have a coop or anything in place. Within the yard, I believe they have the baby chicks, if I recall right from our conversation, inside the house still, so they're looking to get their approvals in place before they put them outside and make a permanent fixture of it. Having discussed with the applicant, she was out of town kind of during the process, but got permission to peek over the fence and take a look at some of the conditions on site. And it's fully enclosed, and as long as, with the condition being recommended that the coop or run be in place, staff's recommending approval of the request with that condition. And the applicants are here this evening if there are direct questions of them.
Thank you. Any discussion? All right.
You know, just a quick question, based on the configuration of the house and how it sets, their backyard appears to be just feet from their two neighbors. Is there a restriction requirement that it be a certain distance from their neighbor's
Yes, there is.
physical structure, and will it meet that?
Yeah, so they, believe, are open still to if there's a specific spot that it needs to be placed. But that is a good question. I think we ran into this recently, and this will be actually a really good example of where that would be specific. It should be at least 15 feet from a dwelling on an adjacent property. So that leaves almost the entire side over here, but right in this bubble, I think this is about 8 feet between this home, so they would have to keep an additional, well, we'll assume it's probably 7 feet from the fence.
Okay.
But the rest of the yard, they could put it up against their own house, but homes on adjacent lots is where that restriction takes place.
Okay.
Thank you. Okay, if there are no further discussion, we'll have a motion.
I'll make a motion then that we grant approval for a conditional use permit for farm animals for Heidi Greenway Thompson at 1130 East Sherwood Drive.
Second.
Aye.
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 Great. Okay, next is a conditional use permit for a development sign at 85 East Crestwood Road, Buffalo Properties, LLC.
So we've previously seen the preliminary plat on this property with the Planning Commission and City Council. In fact, we'll be looking at the final plat later this evening, so a little bit back and forth. But as they're getting rolling on things, they're hoping to get approval to place a development sign. It might be a little more visible in your packet, but towards the center of that lot off of Crestwood. Looks something like this, a 4x8 sign on the property. Based on the frontage of the property and the fact that they've got 5 homes going in there, it seems to fit under the requirements of the ordinance as a development sign. Staff just put in as a recommendation, because eventually when this is developed, there will be a private street on the west side of the property. Doesn't mean that it has to meet the clear vision triangle of our city street intersections, but in that spirit, push it back and over far enough so that people coming in and out of that, construction workers, or anyway, people as the homes start to be filled with families, can see around it and get in and out of the subdivision. So with that, staff recommended that the sign not be up for, or excuse me, that the sign be allowed for a period of 1 year from the date of approval or until all lots are sold, and also that the sign be at least 5 feet behind the sidewalk and 15 feet from the edge of asphalt on the new private street. They do have a representative here this evening if there are questions of them, and I'd be happy to take any myself if needed.
Thank you. All right, shall we call the representative up to discuss anything, questions? I assume you talked to them about the condition, the condition about the sign location?
I did talk to Mr. Stevenson regarding that.
Okay.
And they seem to be okay with that. It gives them still quite a bit of room to put it flexibly on the site and make it work.
Good.
The timing of the sign, is that planned to go in immediately or after the house comes down? Okay. Right. No questions?
Okay. You ready for a motion?
Sure. I will move that we grant a conditional use permit for a development sign for Spring Benson or Darlene Carter of Buffalo Properties LLC at 85 East Crestwood Road. And that the sign will be allowed for a period of 1 year from the date of approval or until all lots within the subdivision are sold, whichever is less, and that the sign shall be placed at least 5 feet behind the sidewalk and 15 feet from the edge of asphalt on the proposed private street.
I'll second. Aye.
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 Nay.
Aye. Did you want a chance for discussion? Didn't get it? Did you want to discuss it?
No, I didn't accept the preliminary plat when we had a pretty robust discussion about this, so, I mean, I'm
Okay.
not, yeah, so, that's where it's at.
I lost my. Okay. Next is modification of a conditional use permit for development signs at 8 South Flint Street, Brighton Homes.
Okay, similar to the last request is a development sign. This is one that the planning commission's actually approved kind of on multiple occasions. When they first had the subdivision approved over a year ago, the corner lot on the north side of Wilden was a model home, and the signs were all there. The sign that they're asking about tonight was actually up at the time and approved originally, but that year lapsed. The model home since moved onto, I think it's lot 6, that you can see there, and put up new signs. The commission looked at those. The applicants complied with them. They took down the flag signs, have a couple up. Had that other sign laying there that they had taken down while moving the model and put that up, and we just essentially forgot about it in the meantime to even think to include that with the approval. So they're just open to use that 8x8 sign. This is it. So you can see it's not quite fresh, so it has been around for a while, but I'm ready to go back up if approved. On the next slide, if you'll move forward just one, Andy, it shows the location that's proposed. So they have 2 existing signs that would technically also count as development signs based on their size, 4x4, that were part of what was looked at last time. And this larger sign would go a little bit closer to the corner. So the total square footage still fits within the potential of the development sign as allowed by ordinance. Based on the configuration with the creek and how things are at, I didn't have any concerns with visibility or anything, even with the size of the sign. So based on that, staff recommended approval as far as placement as proposed, simply with the time limit condition of 1 year until they're finished selling lots within the subdivision. And Brighton Homes does have a representative here this evening, again, so happy to field questions, or they can share information themselves if you would like them to. I'll turn that over to the commission.
Thank you. Any concerns, anything we'd like to discuss?
This is pretty straightforward, too.
Okay.
I'll make a motion that we approve modification of a conditional use permit for a development sign for Brighton Homes of Utah, LLC, at 8 South Wilden Court, with no deviations from staff recommendation.
Do you want to just state that, the 1 year period, is that?
Oh, excuse me, yes. Sign will be allowed for a period of 1 year from the date of approval or until all lots in the subdivision are sold, whichever is less.
Okay.
I'll second.
Josh?
Aye.
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 Okay, great, thank you. Okay, next is a public hearing and request to rezone 1.66 acres of property at approximately 1450 South Burton Lane from R120 to LI Light Industrial for Jim Puffer. And I understand we're going to have the public hearing because we noticed it, but the applicant wants to have this tabled. Is that correct?
Correct, yeah. So because of the noticing, as stated by the chair, the public hearing should still take place. Jim Puffer Landscaping does have someone here to represent themselves tonight, but Jim Puffer himself had a conflict come up, let me know about ahead of time, and hope to be able to share what he's up to before a decision's made one way or the other, so ask that ultimately a decision be tabled. But I did inform him that either way, we still have to have the hearing, so we'll just keep him apprised of any comments so that he can be ready for that
Okay.
at the upcoming meeting.
Do you want to tell us a little bit about it?
Yes, so just with that as a brief introduction, it's kind of got a lot of history on the property that was in the staff report. It was originally part of the subdivision to the north, and kind of became the lost remnant of that subdivision. It was a little less cared for. There's some issues with the developer and getting all the improvements in place, as kind of has already been outlined, and it was determined by staff that largely in part, a church was built instead of several homes in that subdivision, so their densities and things didn't require that this remain as part of that subdivision in order to have enough open space for what they were originally approved for. And as it was kind of becoming a weed lot and a little bit of an issue, working with the HOA, determined that there was probably better uses for it, so they in turn found someone that might be able to use it. Jim Puffer's company has started putting material on the property, and kind of has visions to keep going. So with a better understanding of what they're actually thinking of on it, felt it's appropriate that we consider the zone that probably best fits what it appears that they're wanting to do, both with probably the current use, but also potential for a building to cover some of their more valuable product that wouldn't just be outdoor open storage to prevent it from theft and things. So he could probably explain it a little bit better down the road, but based on that, the site you see here, it's adjacent to, it's currently single-family residential. It is adjacent to residential to the west and residential zoning to the south, but it's actually the DNRG trail directly adjacent to it on the west, which is about a 60-foot right-of-way, so there's a pretty big gap between that and the yards of the homes to the west of it. To the east is the power substation. Here's the Burton Lane Bridge, and then this is a storage unit facility, which is zoned the LI zone, which is the request that's come before us. With that, the general plan, some of the things as far as your consideration for the rezone, again, are in the staff report, but business generally along busier streets, it shouldn't clash with the surrounding uses. Ultimately, we'd be looking for a recommendation from the Planning Commission to pass along to the City Council as to whether or not it feels appropriate on this site for this use. Probably close there unless there's specific questions or other things to have. Again, the public hearing is stated at this time, and if there are questions of, again, the representative from Jim Puffer, if you feel it's appropriate, you're welcome to ask those as well this time.
Thank you. Let me ask a question or two maybe before the public hearing. Tell me again, was this parcel the parcel that was owned by the HOA that was going to be the common area, this whole parcel?
Correct. They have many other common areas, so there are a lot of trails and wrap around this, goes through the center. They've actually got a park in the middle and other trails that lead ultimately over by the junior high. But this was included as a piece of that. The way that it was originally approved, I think it just was grass with trees or something on it, didn't have any amenities as part of it.
And does that development go, is this the very southern tip of that development?
Yes. Yeah, so for their purposes, it was pretty much not usable, kind of disconnected from the community anyway. Probably why it was a little more neglected than some of the others, and then just based off the story with the developer that a lot of homeowners bought into something that was never finished, and there certainly was a lot of effort trying to get those things taken care of, but tracking down someone who was non-cooperative or non-existent to get those covered. We're stuck with what we had, so.
So is the reason why they don't need as much open space as originally thought was because they're not, like those old lots just north of it are not being built? Is that?
Well, no, those would still be considered. So as observed, these lots along this corridor are all vacant, but we do still consider them buildable lots.
They're
So
developable, okay.
at someday, when the pipeline does or doesn't happen, is finalized, Jordan Valley Water that owns those would probably sell those. But north of here, there's an LDS church building where the original plans had 10 or so homes in that
Okay.
area that was swapped out for just that one. And so you lost a number of residences. I think they may have had a little extra open space anyway to begin with. So between the two, it was determined that this wasn't the piece that was necessary to make everything by the book. And
So
meet
even
its
if
numbers.
those homes to the north, those lots are builded out, they still don't need that?
Correct, yeah. It will still comply, and that's the anticipation, is that someday they will be, so we want to make sure that's the case.
One more question, just to the south of it, there's a parcel and then another parcel on that same strip, and there's a house on the southern of those two, right?
Correct.
And then what, is that middle one owned by?
The same person owns both lots.
Okay,
They did receive notice. I've been informed with Jim Puffer that they've had some conversations on what they're up to over the, since they started kind of going on site, and I don't know them personally, so I don't know if they're here this evening to share any comment, but
okay,
anyway, they were made aware of the request.
okay. And we don't know what
I've not heard from them.
okay. All right, sorry, is there more questions before we open this public hearing?
I do have one question. So we had the notice sign up, but was there any other outreach to them?
Yes, so adjacent property owners received a mailer.
Oh, they received a
including
mailer.
that to the south.
Okay,
Um,
great.
Weren't too many. I think these on the back of the trail may have also received one, if I remember how many I sent out. And then the notice was posted, and if it wasn't pushed over by the wind.
Yeah, I think it
which
has been.
I've had to
Anyway,
put it
some
up
of them I
multiple
noticed.
times, and even on the way here, I was joking before the meeting, it was out in the middle of the street, so.
Yeah,
But mailing and posted notice for this.
great, thank you.
I have another question, sorry. The access is a little bit concerning to me. Is that something that the staff has looked at? Comes
Well-
right off that. I mean, that's just like, there's 3 or 4 different turns right there that are I think are difficult.
I don't know if we've studied it in depth, if you have any comments on that at all, Andy, or?
Well, they actually, I think, are in the process of making a property exchange with this adjacent property owner to acquire that little portion of property right there, so that they can bring their access in a little bit better. As they go to a full commercial use, they'll have to submit a site plan, and then we'll have a chance to review that. At this point,
it
it's
seems-
just considered,
Yeah, I mean, it seems difficult because that's a hill. And
you come down and around
then
and
you
it
have-
drops off.
Yeah, you have 2 or 3 blind turns, and then you have, I would imagine you're gonna have big trucks with loads full of rocks, et cetera, going in and out. And then you have all those kids hurrying to Davis High School in the morning. Just worry about that a little bit.
but
Okay.
we will get a site plan if they try to go beyond what they've been doing there currently. So that would give us a chance to
And what's
study
the,
that specifically.
what's the break off to where they have to get a site plan? At what point?
Right now, they're just using that as private storage, so to speak. If they build a building on it, they would have to have a site plan for a building. If they license it as a commercial facility, they would have to have a site plan. So to do any more than just essentially storage of almost a private nature, it's kind of how they were permitted currently, they would have to submit information to us to make sure it complied with everything.
Okay.
Is that little dirt road Is that the access to all of the property, or do they have others on the bend?
I believe this is the only
That's
access.
nothing else on the bend.
It's interesting because when you come up along Burton Lane, you don't really see it. But if you come up Deseret Drive, you see it just coming up.
I had never noticed it before today, that there is all of the rock,
If you come from that way, you see it
right?
easily.
And you too,
Yeah.
are on that road all the time.
Yeah.
I'd never seen it.
When was this, when did Puffer purchase the property?
About a year ago.
What about this little strip right there?
It's just
It's dirt.
side, yeah, I don't know what it. And when he purchased the property, because it's just been using it as private storage, he just didn't ask for a rezone or anything, and then it's come to, I mean, how did it come to our attention?
I went out and met with them, and I think we were aware of the use for the storage for a while, but recently I went out, they have plans to do some significant landscaping work around the perimeter to further buffer the visibility of their site. So you can probably talk in more detail about that and on what they're thinking. So when I met with them at that time and learned about the idea of maybe putting in a building or shed and that, I said, we ought to, if these are the things that are happening and kind of witnessing a little bit more closely what they're up to, ask about the zone that is more appropriate for that request. Whether or not the zone's appropriate
Yeah,
is up to the commission and the council, but that zone seems to fit what they're wanting to do. So that's the consideration.
He actually contacted the staff before he acquired the property and asked if he could do this type of use, and was told that as long as it didn't get too big, it would be fine as it was. But if he wanted to grow it into a full commercial site, he would have to do some other things, including
So-
rezone, so.
if he didn't do any more than he's doing now, would he not need this rezone?
Sure how much he's doing there now, but yeah.
At some level of use,
You could buy a field and store rocks on it without it.
that sounds exciting. So Betty asked a good question. Is that all right-of-way then, between the road and is that all, what is that little strip there?
Yeah, so this is, looks like funny remnant pieces, but it is all right-of-way bordering the eastern portion of this on all edges,
Large right away because of the fill, where the road sits up above.
with the embankments and such.
So Kaysville maintains that, keeps the weeds down and all that?
Oh,
The property owner gets to take care of the adjacent right-of-way, so.
so that gravel road that's, I mean, I think it's more apparent than it shows on this picture, but is that something that the owner can put in and just connect to the street without,
This one?
yeah,
Yeah. Just because of the hill there, they had to, for just convenience, it's easier to come in at this end. It's actually been there for quite some time, even when that was just a horse pasture.
okay,
That was the access that's always been used.
okay. So that's not new, they just used it more maybe, okay.
Right.
All right, I think I'm done hijacking this little part of the commission meeting. We ready for a public hearing? Okay, so we'll open the public hearing on this item for the public hearing on a request to rezone 1.66 acres of property at approximately 1450 South Burton Lane from R120, which is single-family residential, to the light industrial zone. Is there anybody here to speak on that item? After all that. All right, is there someone here from Puffer? That's what you are, okay. Do you have anything you want to add?
Not really, just happy to be here.
Just told to be here? Okay. Well, I guess it's time to close the public hearing then. With the item being tabled, we'll just, do we make a motion to table it?
Yeah, if you would
Okay.
officially make a motion on that.
Who wants to do that?
I'll make a motion that we table the request to rezone 1.66 acres of property from R120, single-family residential, to the LI Light Industrial Zoning District by request of the applicant, Mr. Jim Puffer, at approximately 1450 South Burton Lane.
I'll second.
Before I give an opinion or a vote, do we need to do anything with the public hearing? Do we need to reopen it if we let him come back again?
You wouldn't be required to.
We don't have to, but we usually do. Yeah.
Correct, it would be at your
Okay.
discretion.
Okay. Aye.
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 What are we tabling? Okay, yes, aye. All right, thank you. Next, final plat approval for Crestwood subdivision at 85 East Crestwood Road, Buffalo Properties.
I think you're familiar with this property by now. We've looked at it several times. This is the property on the north side of Crestwood Road. It's been reviewed several times. A few meetings ago, it was reviewed for preliminary plat in this 5-lot configuration, as we see here. They've now completed the engineering, and got things in order. It's ready for final plat. It is very much the same as it was when it went through the preliminary plat approval. The one item that still needs to be addressed a little bit, maybe the developer could address it tonight for us, is in the preliminary plat, there was a request for some fencing. That was made part of the requirements at the preliminary plat. He could probably just describe to you what he has in mind to make sure that meets what your intent was. Otherwise, this is ready to go for final plat approval.
The requirement for fencing, was that something that the city council asked for after our recommendation, or was that simply our recommendation? I remember recommending it.
I believe you recommended it, and the city council also recommended it.
Okay.
So have those discussions taken
required
place
it.
yet?
With the,
Why don't you come up to the, we'll do this officially. State your name if you would, thanks.
So the idea is to put a fence on the west side there between David Fisher, who I believe has acquired Richard Maxwell's piece as well.
yeah.
He has cows on the back half, with a barbed wire fence on his, and my idea is to put a vinyl fence on my side of the property line. Probably not solid because there's east winds that come through there, but semi, some air depths in it.
That's a good idea. Those fences don't tend,
Something, there's,
yeah.
these are just ideas, but something like that.
Okay.
Does
Okay.
and will the fence continue all the way along that whole west side? Yeah,
We'll wait till the private land at the end.
yeah.
At this stage, what discretion, if any, do we have?
As far as which? As far as the fence goes,
to-
you still have some discretion. As far as the plat goes, not much, unless you see something that really needs to be corrected.
Okay, so I guess maybe what I'm asking is, if we do have discretion, what is the scope of that discretion? Or is that too hard of a question?
That's too hard, yeah.
So we have discretion with respect to the fence, whether that's met the conditions we set forward. And then the other is, correct me if I'm wrong, the other is if they've done what we've set forth in the preliminary plat approval, then,
Which they have, right?
then we don't have much discretion.
Okay.
To the extent you think that, then we don't have.
Lot, lot configuration, that kind of stuff, you've essentially approved that already. you can certainly ask nice, and if the developer agrees to what you have in mind, then that's a different issue, but as far as requirement, it's,
Go for it.
Is there any sense about the fence that we have any, I mean, is that in line with what the commission hoped to see?
I guess my only question is the fence on the east side, is that going to be a solid fence or similar to the picture that you just showed us?
On the east side of the property line?
Yeah.
Well,
I didn't know if you're going to be consistent
Any kind of-
all the way around it,
We
the
or,
only one that, my understanding was because there's a change with those on the west, that was the discussion, the homes on the east.
Yeah, there's not a change in use, so we don't change, we
Yeah,
don't.
correct. I
Okay.
think that's what the.
And I think they have fences along there,
They do. The other
pretty much
problem
wood
is
fences.
A couple of those properties, the existing fence, I believe, is a chain link, and it's got a hedge through it. And of
Okay.
course, they would like to keep that hedge. They've asked for me to keep that there, and that's fine. I would prefer to have it.
okay.
I do remember, though, some neighbors on the north side who were wondering about their lack of,
Well,
they're
there's the same thing, there is a fence there,
Mhm.
she's got quite a large, she actually asked, there's a tree in the corner that she wanted kept,
Mhm.
so I'm happy to work with her.
So you haven't had conversations with her yet? I think she,
Yeah, she actually talked with me after we did preliminary.
Yeah.
That
Oh,
was-
okay.
That was her request, was if there was any way we could keep that tree.
oh, okay, so her, even though her chain, I remember seeing it myself, that the chain link, I mean, it's, you can see all the way through, right? Yeah, right, so she'll just live with that, huh?
Well, you know, if we decide to put one there, I don't think that's a big issue. The other problem is there's kind of, between the two lots there is an extremely large, there's a lot of old overgrowth there,
Mm.
and I think they want to keep it there, but I'm happy to work with them. And that's.
I remember her
Problem is
speaking up in the meeting.
On her side of the yard, it's more trimmed back, because it's never been used.
Yeah,
On this side, it's into the property a good 10 feet probably.
the growth on the fence. Oh, I was thinking you could see through the chain link
You
fence.
can't, I mean, there's a tree in the corner, but more towards the middle, there is
Some other stuff.
it does need to be cleaned up.
Uh-huh. I do remember her speaking in the public meeting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But we only,
We only required on the west.
west side, so that's really the only
Okay.
Mm.
discussion.
And I was just going to say that on the east side of town, where I live too, people's solid vinyl fences have definitely been falling down, coming apart. So I feel like that was a good idea, to have the wind be able to pass through.
Yeah, I'm fine with it. It's not a bad look at all.
Okay, thank you. Any other discussion we'd like to have before we have a motion whether we recommend approval of this?
I'm good.
Okay, I'll take a motion.
I'll make a motion that we recommend approval for final plat for Crestwood subdivision for Dan Stephenson, Buffalo Properties LLC at 85 East Crestwood Road.
I'll second the motion. Aye.
Nay.
Aye.
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 Thank you. Okay. Next is a call to the public. All right. No public will call. Move on to item number 9, reports correspondence calendar.
All right, from just our end of staff, just a reminder, in 2 weeks, on the 27th, I believe, the usual schedule will be our next planning commission meeting. So we do have items that are already lined up for that, so we're expected to hold something. Unless anybody else from the planning commission has reports or items they need to share, that's all I've got.
I have one quick question after
Go ahead.
Stroh.
Go ahead.
All right,
ahead.
man first?
Go ahead.
Okay. Just a quick question. I've been noticing this a little bit. Seems like at evening rush hour, the bridge, the 200 North Bridge, going over to the west side is just really backing up. I mean, maybe it's been like this for a long, long time, but I'm trying to remember. It seems like some meeting I've been in, it's been discussed that it was designed so that it could be 2 lanes heading west, right? But it's still only 1 lane, and just wondering about that. If we considered doing something there to help that traffic back up?
Yes, that's been discussed several times. The issue we're dealing with, if you notice on particularly the southwest quadrant, the wall, there's some buckling of the panels there.
Yes.
We've been arguing with the insurance company for about 5 years now on that.
Oh.
We think we're getting close to it. The bridge was built primarily with federal money.
Yep.
Federal money has a lot of strings tied to it. And one of the strings tied to this particular project was it couldn't, this sounds stupid, but it couldn't increase capacity. So we had 3 lanes before, we were allowed to put 3 lanes after. Once we get the panel problem resolved and the federal government releases it, finishes their project, then we can go in and stripe it for 5 lanes.
Okay.
Easy, right?
Thank you for, that update. I know it's been complicated.
It is a little bit, but kind of stupid. But I mean, federal highway said, build it that wide, but only stripe it for 3. There's not a problem. So they told us how to cheat their own system, and that's what we're doing. It just didn't turn out quite as efficiently as we expected.
Yeah. And the panel question is whether it's cosmetic or whether it's anything more, or do we know?
Mostly it's cosmetic.
That's what I thought.
We haven't found any structural problems at all. The panels actually hang 2 feet away from the fill. So they're mostly just, they do protect the fill and the mechanism inside it, but otherwise they're just pretty.
And will there be room for a dedicated sidewalk when we do have to restripe to allow for more lanes? Will there be room there to help cyclists and bicycle or pedestrians?
Not much, no.
That's going to be very tricky, isn't it? And that's one of our, on the active transportation plan, that's one of the very few passages right there.
The
Yeah.
sidewalks are going to get taken out?
No, the sidewalk will remain.
Okay.
There's just one on the north side, I believe, of the bridge.
Yeah.
That's
in
right,
place.
there is
So
one
there
on
is
one
there,
side, just not the
different.
other. And there's lost, I mean, it doesn't connect because you
Well,
have to cross over to get to the other sidewalk and face all the traffic with your bravery.
There's not many good ways to go through a freeway interchange as a
Yeah.
pedestrian, regardless of, but
Yeah,
anyway, that's been looked at, it's still being looked at, so.
yeah, well, thank you. I'll have to go back and look at the plan and what they recommended. I can't really remember what they said there, but it's certainly a thing. A planning thing. Lyle will figure it out. He's young.
Many years to think about it.
All right, we ready to adjourn?
Oh,
Well,
Struggle
Wow.
had a
are you
comment.
good? Are you done?
Yes, done.
Okay, good. So item number 6, that's tabled. Is that going to reappear on the 27th agenda? or is
Great
that-
question. Yeah, we'll have it back on the next agenda.
All right, it's on it. So. All right.
Make a motion that we adjourn.
Great.
Second.
you didn't even have to ask.
I said it 3 times, so I didn't want to say it again. I didn't want to seem too eager, so.
I thought we were.
You are so patient.